Yeah, thanks. Thanks everybody for the guys who showed up. Really appreciate it. So I think just quickly, I'm just going to ask Manas and Anshuman to just do a quick intro of what you guys really do, your incredibly interesting jobs, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Sure.
Sorry,
So guys, I'm founder of a company called Increff. We work with fashion brands and retailers on two fronts, helping them optimize their merchandise. So right from merchandise planning, buying, and allocation, and on omni-channel order fulfillment. So from your warehouses and store inventory, exposing it to different channels and fulfilling all orders from the most optimal location. So we work with more than 700 brands across 15 countries. Yeah.
Thanks, Anshuman. Hey guys, this is Manas. I head the D2C Ecommerce business for PUMA, which is essentially everything that we sell on our own PUMA.com and app, as well as everything that is sold through the partner platforms of Amazon and Flipkart and Myntra and so on. I hope I don't have to introduce PUMA, but it's a sportswear brand. It's the largest in our category in India. Yeah, so that's what we do. Anshuman actually also works with us as Increff, so it's been a great partner throughout.
Thanks. And I think the topic today is to just understand how do you manage these retail business in these highly turbulent times. I think the session before that, they talked a lot about technology and putting in end-to-end visibility, supply chain, in-store electronics, and tech to basically track customer. But I think the biggest challenge, and as I talk to a lot of the retailers today and over the last few months, the big challenge has been the built up of inventory over the last few months, especially last 1 year. Some of the reasons that we all discussed, and I'll just mention those, and then we get a bit more into that. Obviously, we came out of COVID with a bang. After people getting stuck at home, all offline retail being shut for 2 years. So there was a lot of revenge buying, and obviously when the stores opened up, post that, that became the new base. Everybody, because almost, if I look at all the numbers, all the brands are still at 2019 sort of, volume and value. So we lost 2 years, but we caught up pretty quickly post that, right? So there was also a reverse migration. There was people going back to the villages and tier 2 towns and their homes to work from. So that had an impact when they were buying from there. E-commerce grew a lot during this time, so that changed habits. Higher cost of living, as people have moved back to big cities, is having an impact. So just talk through, Manas, I'll start with you. What are some of the factors that you attribute to this built-up of inventory that we've had as a challenge right now? And then we'll come back, I'll hear from Anshuman as well. And then we'll just talk about what are some of the things you guys are doing as you look at the next 2 to 3 years. What is it that different that you guys are doing to avoid this happening again? Because I'm sure it's a bit of a stress point, right?
Yeah, no, thanks, Rajat. So, I mean, see, like you mentioned, right? Coming out of COVID, there was just massive exuberance in the consumer, right? There was just so much pent-up demand. People had not been outside for a long time. There was heavy growth that we saw in categories, right, like sportswear, fashion, quick service restaurants, food, etc. There was also, I think, what it also supported was, I think, the purchasing power or the amount of money that people had to dispense in their wallet, because salaries really hadn't taken a cut in a short term, right? A lot of folks had sort of moved back to lower tier cities. So the proportion that you would give out on rent and food and everything else had sort of reduced. And so there's just a lot more capacity to spend. There wasn't travel spends. So a lot of the categories that would, compete with fashion and sportswear and the likes weren't really demanding anything, right? And so that naturally led to a huge exuberance in sort of 21 and 22. Categories like footwear were growing at 25-30% CAGR from, a 20 all the way to 22. I mean, PUMA ourselves, we doubled our business from 2019 levels to 2022, right? So there was just massive growth all over. And now, there is, people sometimes forget to calibrate that there could be a downturn when there is an upswing, and that's just human nature, right? So I think across brands and retailers, there was just massive buildup in anticipation of this continued growth, which clearly didn't happen in 2023. I think there was just excess buying that sort of went into 2022. We also, I think, started seeing the reverse migration that had happened as that moved back, as return to office and removal of work from home sort of started happening. A lot of this talent and workforce that had moved back to lower tier cities started moving to the higher tier cities. The rents were sort of going up, and I think all of us feel the pangs of that. So suddenly you see that same discretionary spend that was available is now being competed for by rents, higher cost of living, travel is sort of booming, all the stats are sort of towards that. And so there is excess buying that happened previously. There is less money to spend in, say, 2023 and going forward versus how much people had in 2022, right? And I think a number of these factors sort of led to the build-up and just the tough, turbulent times that we're seeing, right? I think there are some other factors that I think long-term are great for the country, but the push from the government on sort of make in India it started coming in certain categories, and that naturally then leads to a lot of volatility as to what's going to happen in the near term. And so I think brands and retailers trying to figure out, hey, how do we really plan for that? Do we push inventory or pull inventory right now? I think that too added to the turbulent times that we've been seeing, right? Over to Anshuman and sort of think about what.
So I think, yeah, there's great points. And maybe, Anshuman, you talk a bit about how have you seen retailers' behavior change, because you're doing the whole demand planning and forecasting, and you've got the right from the front end to the back end, your systems are managing that. So just talk briefly about what are some of the big changes you've seen in retailer behavior in terms of forecasting, demand planning cycles, because normally they're 9-month cycle. Now you're talking about 60, 90 days. So just talk briefly about it.
I think if I look at pre-COVID, most of the retailers in India and unfortunately globally also had a very long planning cycle and mostly used to work on Excel models, and the time they take to collect data, to clean it up, crunch and all, they had a very long and comfortable planning cycle, right? The frequency of swings or shocks post-COVID basically made them or forced them to react faster. And the older models of working on Excel models and kind of taking your own time is no more viable. So if you see in last couple of years, most of the retailers have now moved to using planning tools which can help crunch this time and make your decision making faster, make them more agile and more reactive to these swings, right? Earlier, if you could react in a couple of months, now if you can react in few weeks, it gives you that much more time. And then your whole planning process becomes more agile, right?
And I think what's also interesting, and we are seeing, and we were talking to some other retailers like Aditya Birla, etc., during the breaks, and they've shortened their whole planning cycle a lot, right? So they are happy to be out of stock, then have tons of inventory, and I think fast fashion has also pushed that. Because if I look at fast fashion today, I remember many years ago, if you went to a store and something was out of stock, you were like so upset. But now fast fashion, they change the windows and this collection so frequently that consumers have just got used to it, that if I go this time, I may not get it next time when I come, so I better buy. And maybe that's also changing behavior as well, right?
Yeah. See, and I think there are a couple of other things which has happened. That earlier brands were building dedicated inventory for different channels. They had dedicated inventory for online, they had offline, within offline multiple channels, right? There was no common inventory or talking inventory. This whole swing or shock forced them to relook at that model, where now many brands are keeping a common pool of inventory, exposing 100% inventory to every channel, and letting the customer decide where the demand is coming from rather than trying to predict that demand, right? If you start blocking inventory, that makes the inventory more inefficient. The moment you keep it common, make the 100% inventory available to every customer, that gives you that agility to react to the demand across channels.
To comply with that.
Absolutely. And I think that's what has changed in the last few years. Earlier, if you look at the typical supply chain planning tech and inventory management tech, they were not designed for managing both offline and online orders from a common pool. today you have those kind of tech available where you can have common pool and yet expose that to 10 different channels in real time and react to it without having unfulfilled orders, without having order cancellation and impacting customer demand, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
a bit about the front end side. Like how have you, obviously there's a back end piece, talk briefly of that.
right.
So what are you doing on the front end to capture data real time on POS or from online platform? You said 20% of it is on your platform. How does that, the single view of customer, is that also helping some of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does, right? I think just technology and the cost and also the viability of using technology is just, leapfrogged over the last several years. I mean, personally, for PUMA, for example, we have a singular customer view, whether the customer is sitting and coming through my own .com channels or through our stores, right? We understand who that person is, what's the frequency of buying, what are their personal preferences, etc. And that just allows us to plan. See, the more degrees of freedom you have in planning, the better you can plan, right? So like Anshuman said, previously you were planning for each individual silo separately. So there is only so much you can do. Right now, I do understand across pin codes, across platforms, across customer geographics, what are the preferences? And so that allows me to have a more leaner inventory levels, right? Faster reorder rates. So I mean, the technology has clearly played a huge play. And we even heard in the panel before, right? The number of times you now hear retailers and brands talk about endless aisles, omni, this wasn't the case 5 to 7 years ago, right? So there is meaningful, significant change that's happening in the market, right? And I think there's still a long way to go, right? Which is, I think, is a great opportunity for all of us. In fact, some of these shocks that we see, be it COVID or 2023, I think they accelerate progress in multiple dimensions, right? And it's the same thing that while it's painful in the moment for all of us, I think there's just so much newness and different ways of working that come out of it, right? If I think about PUMA or even a lot of other brands as we've gone through 23 and look ahead, a number of things that have become clearer is, economic downturns will keep happening, right? I think it's allowed us to take a step back and say, you know what, there is a core business that we've always focused on, which is running performance in sports. This downturn will come and go, but that's where we need to continue focus. So investments there, as you think about capital allocation, you just become razor sharp on the depth rather than the width, right? And that discipline sometimes leads those shocks, right? So I think that's one change that we've done to sort of manage this turbulence that the industry is going through. The second is, I think it also allows you to just be thoughtful about what are the long-term trends and bets that aren't going to go away just because you had a temporary shock, right? And one of those clearly in the Indian market is premiumization, right? I mean, the macros support it. We are a fifth of China's per capita income. Our internet penetration levels are meaningfully lower than what China is today. India has always been an aspirational society. Now we actually have something to back that up with per capita income increasing and the folks sitting in the higher income strata just increasing in a massive proportion. Now, as that is happening, right, I think a lot of brands, including us, we are sort of straddling and strategizing around how do we keep this vast value-conscious consumer segment, which is huge, right? But also start planning for servicing this small but massively high-growth premium segment in the market, right? And so that leads to extensive investment in product development. It leads to better and more significant, brand collaborations and asset collaborations. So that's sort of the second thing, right? First is you focus on your core, you become thoughtful about long-term bets, and then I think the third for us has been whatever near-term shocks that I think are meaningful enough, how do we quickly react to that, right? So for example, the whole make in India push that I think the country and the government is rightly pushing, we've for a long time have been increasing our investment in local production, right? And we've accelerated that, right? I think it's a great thing for us, for anyone to do for the country, and I think this uncertainty actually is a great opportunity for us to push this investment for local manufacturing. And that helps in many ways, right? It helps reduce the turnaround time, the cycle time that Anshuman spoke about, because it's nearer to us. There are lower logistic constraints that we deal with. It helps us reduce costs, which can then be pushed back into growth and marketing, right? So I think there are multiple opportunities that sort of came out of the shock that we've been getting.
Should we just talk a bit about what are some of the, say, the top 3 things you're seeing retailers do, back end, front end, which are...
So I'll give you a few examples of the work we have done with few retailers, right? So we are working with one of the largest eyewear brand, where earlier their store replenishments used to happen every 15 days or 2 weeks. Now with the technology, they are able to react almost every day. So the technology pulls up the demand pattern and inventory at every store as of yesterday. And now their replenishments have moved from 15 days to daily replenishments. What this has led to is a lower inventory in the stores, faster replenishments. So you have the right inventory in the store, your turnaround of inventory is faster. You're not blocking your working capital.
And not losing customers as well.
Absolutely. Right? Take another example, for example, with PUMA. Earlier, it was a dedicated inventory for e-commerce, but then with the technology, they have now exposed their entire inventory, both the B2B inventory and the e-commerce inventory, to all channels. Now, the moment you have that kind of exposure, suddenly your inventory is exposed to a much larger customer base, and the inventory can now kind of turn around much faster. So it's becoming more efficient. Right? With another brand, for example, we started their Omni channel, so exposing store inventory as well as their warehouse inventory, and then routing the order to the most optimal location. It can be warehouse, it can be the store. Now, 2 things happen. Their width of exposure grew, so their store like-to-like business grew almost 15-20% because of this higher exposure. But at the same time, they had a faster delivery time to the customer at a lower cost. So you are basically, this shock has forced brands and retailers to look at the core of their business and find out those nuggets where they can improve the efficiency, improve inventory efficiency, unlock working capital.
Yeah, and I think as we heard from the Aditya Birla team as well before this, that 80% of their stores are now connected to the customers, which has actually pushed 25% up to 25% of the business in their stores online.
Yeah.
So I think, I think we're out of time, but, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you guys for the session. Lots of learnings for me, and always interesting to hear from the industry in terms of what are some of the things you guys are doing. They're going to be around here, so please do catch up with them. Lots of meaningful gyan on retail. Yeah. Thanks so much, Anshuman. Thanks, Manas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rajat. Thanks, guys.
Manas.